Nick and Pat here for Polygon, and we're here at E3 2017, where we went hands-on, or at least I went hands-on. You sat next to me while I went hands-on.
I was nearby.
For Star Wars Battlefront II's single-player campaign, which we haven't really seen much of before yesterday.
Right. That was a big complaint coming out of the last one. Was like, I want to play Star Wars stories in my shooter game. And this time around, they can.
Yeah, you can. It is technically in there now. So in this game, you play as Iden Versio, who is an Imperial officer. And I think it's important to set when this game takes place. It's right. They said it's right after the end of Return of the Jedi, but that the story spans all the way to the beginning of The Force Awakens. Is that right? Which is a pretty That sounds like a pretty big expanse of time to cover in one single-player campaign.
For sure. And I was chatting with some of the folks working on the game, and they had an interesting angle on it. I was asking them about the fact that you're playing as the Imperials, who have been the bad guy for the entire thing. And their angle is, what if the destruction of the second Death Star was a catastrophe rather than a victory? So viewing it from the other side of that, think about all the friends and colleagues and stuff that you would have lost with this giant fucking space station blew up.
Yeah, that's never really been addressed in mainline Star Wars fiction before.
Yeah.
So you're playing as this character, and the mission that we saw, that I played, opens with her talking to her father in this super hyper high fidelity pre-rendered cutscene with some really impressive face capture tech, going right up to the edge of
almost creepy.
Almost creepy.
But really not that creepy.
No, it didn't. It didn't set me off the way I guess Injustice 2, a game I've also been playing recently, does, where the faces are just so much and it's all you can think about. It mostly just looked really expensive, and it felt Star Warsy. It felt contemporary. The writing felt like it didn't feel like cast off leftover video game writing the way old Star Wars games did, if that makes sense.
Right.
The production value felt like it was there.
So then after some chit-chatting on the deck of a Star Destroyer, it shifts into flying, right?
Yeah, so this demo opened with us flying a TIE fighter around, and I died 3 times in this sequence because they've fundamentally shifted the controls for vehicle stuff from Battlefront 1. So the way it works now is you're using the right analog stick to kind of aim and pilot around, and then the left analog stick is used for acceleration and deceleration, which all adds up with how it was in the first game. But the new thing here is that by pressing left and right on the left analog stick, you can control your rotation. So you actually have full 360-degree, Hexen style control. You can just flip upside down at any time or go sideways, which is really empowering on the one hand. On the other hand, it took a few seconds to get used to, just because it worked so differently from the old game, but it was freeing in a way. It feels like there's a bigger skill gap now for flying your ships. You can just turn a vehicle upside down if you want to and weave around. It seems like something you could get really good at, which is not how I felt about the vehicle stuff in Battlefront 1.
We watched the demo before you got your hands on it.
That's
and
right.
The impression that you got is that that TIE fighter flying sequence was sort of on rails and very scripted, but then you sort of tried to break it a little bit. What did you?
Yeah, well, so what happened was when watching them play it, I thought that it was this very tightly controlled E3 demo thing, because the pilot was flying really, really low and ducking and weaving and stuff, and I was like, this is all fake. And then when I got my hands on it, I realized it's just a really experienced player playing it. You can actually kind of go anywhere and do anything in any order, and I halfway through one of the sequences, I'm like, I'm going to do this whole thing upside down now, and it worked. It wasn't really as fake as I thought it was going to be. And after the flying sequence wraps up, you kind of fly into the hangar of this rebel ship, and while still in the TIE fighter, you mow down all these rebels.
Yeah.
And they've got ships parked that you're blowing up and stuff, and it's a little turret sequency, but it was also very brutal that you're just murdering all these people.
Yeah.
But what I love about that is that they injected a little bit of levity into it, because as soon as you hop out of that TIE fighter and get into normal third-person shooter controls, there's a gonk droid that's on fire, just slowly walking across the screen to kind of maybe dampen the fact that you just murdered a bunch of characters who we've been taught to think of as heroes for the past 30-ish years. So from there it goes into Battlefront third-person shootery combat. One change that they've made is the venting system for blasters, because obviously in the Star Wars universe, standard reloading doesn't necessarily exist. The way it works in this game now is that there are actually 2 windows on that active reload system. One of them I think is yellow, and if you reload in there, you just immediately get to vent and you can shoot again. There's also a tinier, harder to hit green window on the active reload bar, and if you landed in there, you not only reload, you get 10 seconds of free shooting without any risk of overheating. So, I'm a fan of active reload stuff. I always kind of wonder why it isn't in more games, and it was in Battlefront 1, but here they've kind of doubled down on it and added a second layer of risk and skill to that reload system.
One of the other things that they've changed is there's recoil management now. So how did the shooting feel to you?
It's funny because I remember you talking to them and them mentioning the recoil stuff. It didn't feel like super extreme.
Okay.
I guess what I would say is that I remember Battlefield 1 feeling very like detached and light because there was no recoil. It felt like you were just aiming a camera and shooting lasers. And in this, it felt more like a third-person shooter. You know what I mean? But yeah, it wasn't like super obvious unless it was pointed out to me.
Yeah.
And you're sort of running through this area. You've got a droid with you that you can use by targeting people. It's on a cooldown. You can hit R1 to kind of have this droid run up to them and use, I think it's called shock, where it just tases them really quickly.
Yep.
And then grenades on L1 like you'd expect. And then you have this other power on triangle, which you can only use, I guess, once per mission, they were saying. And it just kind of is this enormous explosive device that just wipes everyone on the screen. And yeah, I think the on-foot stuff was the least compelling for me. At the beginning of the demo, they made it really clear that this game is like, they built it on the multiplayer infrastructure because, in their words, they want you to be able to move seamlessly between the two and not have to relearn the controls. But I think a result of that is that it feels like a really high production value game built on an engine made for multiplayer, kind of.
Sure.
And as a result, like, it's not the most exciting third-person shooter in the world. I think this game is going to live or die on the story stuff, and what I saw of that was interesting enough that I feel like I would maybe slog through a third-person shooter with some cool vehicle stuff to see this narrative play out. So that's what we thought of Star Wars Battlefront II's single-player portion, or at least what we've seen of it. This is just the beginning of our very robust E3 coverage that we're doing here in Los Angeles this year. We have a lot of game coverage videos and a lot of weird surprises too. So stay tuned, and thank you guys so much for watching. We will see you again soon.